Very good. Nick, questions that have come in from the audience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, let's do this. Brian had a question that he rephrased for us. He's saying if you're targeting a specific drying temp, regardless of turnaround temp, targeting a specific time phases, is the idea that a lower turnaround temp is now going to result in later milestones okay? Or is that something to avoid? I think you touched on this a little bit. I think just a clearer answer.
Okay, so I want to tell you that everything is okay if it results in this, okay? If it helps your coffee taste good, then you can feel free to break a rule. Starting with a clear foundation will help you get to that point more consistently. If you have a coffee that's an odd duck, that for whatever reason within this system, you know that your roaster is heated and stable, you know that your ambient temperature in the room is stable, you know that you're roasting the same amount of coffee, but for whatever reason, it's dropping well outside of a reasonable limit, then treat that coffee as that coffee is responding within that system, okay? If you go and make an over-adjust for that coffee being outside of spec and try to get it inside of spec, then you're double forcing that coffee. That coffee is telling you that it's different. There's something different about it that you have not experienced before. And so then by nature of that, that should tell you, I don't know this coffee. But if you respond to that by saying, but I'm going to treat it like every other coffee and get it to file and rank, then you are automatically mistreating that coffee. So if it starts falling out of rank, then you need to set your parameters different. If that coffee doesn't crack on time, if it cracks at 10 minutes as opposed to 8.5 minutes, it's okay. Get to the end of that roast by following that coffee's lead, by making your adjustments according to where your turnaround temperature was, and then make all of the consecutive adjustments to follow that to where if normally it takes 4 minutes after turnaround for yellow, but turnaround happens at 2 minutes instead of 1.5 minutes, then go ahead and make an adjustment and say, now I want to have yellow or my coffee fully dried at 4.5 minutes instead of 4. And then I'm going to push my first crack accordingly. And then get to where you can taste it. And taste it in the same way that you taste it every other time. Make sure that all of those things, all of your variables are consistent so that then you can go back and you can say, you know what, that tasted really great. I'm happy with that roast and it's fine. I had to break the rules.
Joe, as I listen to you, you sound more principles bound than rules bound when you roast. So it's about staying fluid, open to what the coffee presents, rather than coming at the coffee with a set of rules that you're going to govern for that roast.
That's right. And starting with a very clear-cut set of rules will actually allow you to be freer later on for the coffee to kind of play within that set, because you'll know that it's the coffee that's making the change. Whereas if you don't start with this, you don't know if it's the roaster, the coffee, or you that's messing the system up. So if you can eliminate variables as much as possible and get to the coffee itself, then that coffee is going to show you where it kind of needs to go.
Very good. Nick, any other questions there?
Yes, sir. Let me scroll. Here at Mill City, in the videos that we do, Dave talks a lot about cutting gas for that first minute and a half until you hit turning point. Harrison Boyd is wondering, is that part of this thought process? Does that play in? And to that same point, just to jump on with another question, how do you react to gas and airflow throughout this turning point?
I can take it from Mill City. I use a minute. I do not use turning point. Turning point varies for me 55 seconds to 1:10 with full capacity. And that's just a data point. I file that away mentally and saying, ooh, this is denser than I thought. I leave the burners off for that first minute in that I want that bean soaking in every bit of heat because I'm trying to drive two things: that core temperature to the same temperature as the outside, and I want to activate the water. So I want that bean just taking in the heat. So I use a minute with burners off. Joe roasts differently. And again, we're talking about roaster's preference. So turning point doesn't govern me reigniting the burners. Time does.
And I would agree with Dave actually on this. When I am...
There's a first.
When I am profiling a coffee, or I'm roasting a coffee for the very first time, I will react to how the coffee's turning around with the way that I turn on the gas. And that's what you've seen me do here, because every coffee that I've roasted here has been the first time with the coffee and the first time on that machine with that coffee.
Right.
And many times on the first roast that I've done on that machine, period. So, but if I'm in a situation where I've already drawn up a profile, I'll backtrack that up and get to the point where I'm turning on my gas at the same point every time. But I make an adjustment as to how high I turn on my gas based on the first few times that I roasted, seeing where that turnaround is naturally occurring.
Absolutely. And how much gas you're administering.
Exactly.
Coming out of that turn.
Yep. And if I have a sharp turnaround, then I know that the coffee is reacting to the heat in a very fast way. And so that sharp turnaround will tell me that I need less gas whenever I charge my roast. However, if I see a sagging turnaround, then that tells me generally that I need a little bit more gas. Another question?
Any changes for electric drum roasters and what we've talked about here today?
Electric, light, so you can get a halogen bulb that can drive your roast. Air, gas, these are all methods of heating coffee. So whether it's electric or whether it's gas, it's still energy coming from heat. So the basic principles of this should apply regardless of what kind of heat source that you have. The electric burner is heating the metal, and the metal is heating the coffee. The electric burner is heating the air, and the air is heating the coffee. So it's just all a matter of that particular system, seeing how the coffee reacts within that system. And if you have electric, or if you have gas, or if you're roasting on an air roaster, it's about setting base parameters to start with your batch size, temperature of your equipment, and the temperature of the coffee going in, and then how much gas or how many amps you're going to apply to that coffee after that.
Very good. Nick, anything else?
I think we touched on this. Jeff is wondering, moisture content of the bean or humidity, how much does that affect your initial charge time for your turnaround point?
Joe, every day up here, particularly, humidity will shift on us. We'll go from a very humid day to all of a sudden it's dry. What kind of change do you see in the same bean that you've roasted on a Tuesday versus a Wednesday?
So this is a very difficult question to address. There is the humidity of the coffee itself, which I don't know if that's the exact question. I think that's what the question's applying to.
That was the question, but I like both of them.
Okay, and then there's the humidity of the air that we are in, or the environment. In my opinion, humidity is not what is making any kind of an effect on any of this. In my opinion, it is the density of the coffee and the density of the air. The density of the air is kind of affected by humidity. The density of the coffee is also kind of affected by the humidity of the coffee. However, we can measure both through the density check on the coffee and barometric pressure within our environment. So if you're roasting on a small roaster like this, barometric pressure is going to be kind of a non-issue. And I think that it's something that we really shouldn't be focusing on. If you're roasting in a very large roaster, the pressure pushing down on that roast is going to have a major change to how that roaster will roast. And so that, in a large roast setting, will affect the way that you play with airflow, okay? But I don't think that that applies to anything above, say, a 70 kilo drum or beyond. If you are seeing changes in the coffee due to the moisture in the coffee or the moisture in the air, I would recommend looking at some other triangulating data to make sure that you're not making a corollary judgment as opposed to an actual sound judgment. I think that baristas do this all the time. They see that their coffee shot dries out all of a sudden, and they say, oh, the you know, humidity in the room changed, so it put my grind off. That is a correlation, that's not a causation. We know now that that is not true.
So when you were a barista, you never said that?
I did say that.
All right.
And I said the same thing about humidity in coffee and the same thing about humidity in the air. But now I know better, now that I have
Super.
tried, like, check your barometric pressure, check the humidity, check the temperature of the drum. Make sure that there's not some other thing that is also off. And I'll venture to bet that there is, that there's something else that you can draw a conclusion from.
Good questions. Nick, are there any others out there?
No, we're just all talking now about you guys. It's amazing.
Well, that's good. That's good. Good session. Nick, I think we're about at a wrap-up time. We've billed these as 25 to 30-minute segments. How are we on time?
34.
Okay. What I'd like to do then is see if I can wrap it up.
Do it.
With some...
Are you going to actually wrap?
I'd like to. Let's see if we can summarize some of the things Joe emphasized. Stay consistent on your charge size as you're beginning to learn that roaster. Do the same charge size time after time after time. A lot of roasters, 75 to 80% is a sweet spot. With the North roasters, do your full charge size.
And make sure that that charge size is on the high end. Like, we don't want to, if you're on a 1 kilo machine and you say, well, I'm doing the same charge size every time, and you're doing 100 grams, that doesn't count to us, okay? You're too small, and the variables involved there are throwing you way off. Sorry to interrupt.
No, so I will permit that interruption 1,000 times.
Okay.
The emails and the calls I get about that. What Joe discussed today, he was talking and using software profiling. Everything he talked about, if you've got a 5x8 card with time and temperature and are tracking and plotting it that way, everything applies. Turning point is a variable that's dependent on the bean, on your starting charge temp, and the ambient temperature in your atmosphere or whatever your bean temp is. Try to keep these consistent until you're learning that roaster. The lower the turning point, the denser the bean. The tighter that cell is within that bean. If you get a really sharp spike coming at a turning point, you may have too much gas, too heavy of a foot on the pedal. So pay attention to the sharp turning points. What else did you want to emphasize that I talked about today?
And the most important thing is it making you happy? Are you enjoying the coffee? That is the most important thing. Enjoying the process is great. It's geeky, it's fun. We can get down a lot of rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, taste your coffee. And if there's something wrong and you've done your homework to where you have managed everything, then you should be able to find that variable that was off. And if you don't, that means that there are probably a lot of other variables that you don't know about. So tune in into future events from us, and hopefully we'll cover some of that.
Look forward to that.
Questions.
Nick?
I got 2 things for you, Dave.
Yes.
We need to see your tattoo. I need you to drop this. Right in there. I made you a little padding thing. Hold it up for the camera. Show me your tattoo. Look at that. It's a beautiful bear with the Twin Cities skyline. His wife hates it. You all love it. Perfect. Hold up the mic for the camera. 3, 2.
It's a wrap.
Peace!
Dropping the mic.